My husband, Sean, vanished for 6 straight days. No calls, no texts, just gone. Then, he finally strolls back in, not a care in the world, with this smug grin plastered on his face. He looks at me and says, "You should be thankful I even came home." I just looked at him, dead calm, and replied, "You're right, thank you, but this isn't your home anymore." And then I handed him the yellow envelope. I watched every single drop of color drain from his face. "You should be grateful I even came home." Sean stood there in our hallway, looking like he'd just stepped out of a spa. After 6 days of complete radio silence, he looked refreshed, radiant, and he was actually expecting gratitude. He really thought he could just waltz back in from the affair I had already documented, down to the last dollar. He thought I was still the same old Jane, the accommodating wife who'd just ignore the smell of cologne I didn't buy, the one who'd nod along with his BS stories about conferences that never existed. He was wrong, but to understand just how catastrophically, life-alteringly wrong he was, I need to take you back 3 months, back to when I still believed in the marriage I thought we had, back to when I was still Jane Brennan, the woman who made excuses for shady behavior and told herself that trust meant not asking the hard questions, back to before I found out that the foundation of our 12 years together had been quietly dissolving, and I was too busy keeping up appearances to even notice the cracks. Before we get into the receipts, I just want to thank you for being here. This is a story about resilience, but it's also about strategic strength. If you believe that betrayal deserves accountability and that protecting yourself isn't just an option, it's a necessity, then please consider subscribing. It's free, and it helps us reach more people who need to hear that they are not alone. Now let's watch this dumpster fire unfold. My name is Jane Brennan. I'm a marketing consultant here in Chicago, specializing in brand strategy for mid-sized firms. For 7 years, I'd been married to Sean Montgomery, an architect at Morris & Associates, one of the city's big-name design firms. Before we got married, we dated for 5 years. That's 12 years total. A dozen years building what I believed was a rock-solid partnership, long enough to think you know someone, inside and out, long enough to be devastatingly wrong. We met at a dinky community theater production. I was running publicity, and he was building the sets. I remember watching him work, the precision he used to measure lumber, the way he assembled the skeletons that would become the play's whole world. He came up to me during a break, sawdust still clinging to his shirt, and asked if I wanted coffee. We ended up talking for 3 hours at a diner down the street, sketching out our dreams on paper napkins. We both saved those napkins for months, like they were precious artifacts, the start of something big. Those early years were a beautiful struggle. Sean was trying to make a name for himself in a brutal market, taking low-paying gigs to build his portfolio. I was climbing the ladder from junior consultant to senior strategist, pulling 16-hour days to prove I was indispensable. We survived on takeout, shared ambition, and cheap champagne we couldn't really afford, celebrating tiny wins in our tiny apartment where the kitchen and living room were basically the same 12-foot space. My mother, of course, had disapproved. She called his career unstable and questioned if an architect could give me the security she wanted for me, but we proved her wrong, together. Or so I thought. By the time we got married, we'd both made it. Sean landed his job at Morris & Associates and eventually became a senior designer. My consulting practice exploded. I was pulling in 6-figure contracts and actually turning clients down. We moved into a 2-bedroom condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. And here's a detail that matters. The condo was purchased almost entirely with inheritance money I received from my grandmother, a fact that seemed like just a footnote back then, but would later become legally significant. Our life had a rhythm. Saturday mornings were for the farmers market near Lincoln Park. Sean would meticulously pick produce while I complained about the price of organic kale. Friday nights were for Thai takeout and a movie, our choices alternating in a system we'd kept for years. We hosted dinner parties where our friends would call us the couple that makes marriage look easy. A compliment I used to be proud of, but now just feels like proof of my own willful blindness. I loved the small things, the way he'd read passages from his architecture journals out loud while I worked on client proposals, or the inside jokes that made it feel like we had our own private language, the comfortable silence. Those were my receipts that our marriage was solid. The changes started about 3 months before that awful night in the hallway. They were subtle at first, easy to brush off. Sean started waking up earlier. His alarm, always 6:15 a.m., was suddenly set for 5:30. He'd spend forever in the bathroom with the door locked, emerging already dressed and smelling of a cologne I absolutely did not recognize. It was expensive, woody, and nothing like the drugstore aftershave he'd worn for a decade. When I asked about it, he mumbled something about a sample from a client meeting. It was too small to fight over, but it lodged in my brain. Then came the phone. That thing used to be tossed on the counter, on the nightstand, wherever. Suddenly it was attached to his hip, always face down, always just out of my sight. If I walked into the room while he was texting, he'd flip the screen away just a little too fast, a little too deliberately. His laptop, once open, now had new passwords. Small digital walls, going up one by one. Then, the money. I started seeing financial weirdness in our joint account. Every single Thursday, like clockwork, a cash withdrawal. Always $200. It was an amount carefully picked to be just under the radar, not enough to trigger a fraud alert, but consistent enough to be a blazing red flag once I finally started paying attention. Charges for restaurants I'd never heard of. Always on weeknights when he claimed to be working late on a high-stakes project. When I'd ask about the late nights, his answers got shorter, more defensive. "It's a demanding project, Jane. You know how deadlines work," he'd snap, with an edge that was clearly meant to shut me down. Oh, I understood deadlines. My whole life was deadlines. But in my experience, deadlines didn't require new cologne, a locked phone, and a steady, secret drain of $200 in cash every single week. My best friend, Queen, noticed I was falling apart before I even admitted it to myself. We were at our monthly coffee meetup near Millennium Park. Queen is a divorce attorney, one of the sharpest in Chicago. She makes her living documenting the end of relationships. She studied my face with a clinical eye. "You look wrecked, Jane," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a diagnosis. What's really going on? And it all just spilled out. The growing distance, the 5:30 a.m. alarms, the secret cologne, the way he guarded his phone like it was the nuclear codes. The gut feeling that I was living with a man who was physically present but emotionally had already moved out. Queen listened. She didn't judge, but I saw that flash of recognition in her eyes, the professional, "Yep, I've seen this movie before" look. "Jane," she said so carefully, professionally, "I've seen this exact fact pattern 1,000 times. I'm not saying Sean is definitely having an affair, but I am saying that what you're describing are the textbook, chapter and verse warning signs. Trust your gut. It's usually right. Most people know the truth long before they're ready to admit it to themselves." She didn't push. She knew I had to get there on my own. But that night, lying in bed next to Sean as he scrolled through his phone with his back turned to me, I felt something crack. It wasn't my heart. It was the foundation of my denial. I had been performing ignorance, protecting myself from a truth I already knew. Queen's words had just ripped away that last layer of denial. The final confirmation came on a Tuesday night. Sean made his first big mistake. He left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he went to take a shower. I heard him in there, singing a John Mayer song I had never ever heard him play in 12 years. The ick factor was off the charts. The screen glowed. And as I walked by, a new email notification popped up. It fundamentally reorganized my reality. "Last night was incredible. He's clueless. Can't wait for next week." The sender's name was Amber Caldwell, a project manager at his firm. Someone he'd mentioned, maybe a dozen times over the years. "Competent," he'd said. "Professional, strictly business." My hands were shaking. I read that preview text over and over, praying I was misunderstanding the plain English on the screen, knowing absolutely that I wasn't. If you've ever felt that cold dread in your gut, that exact moment your world just shatters into a million pieces, hit that subscribe button. You're part of this tribe now, and if you'd just let it slide, maybe head to the comments and explain why you're built different. I'm genuinely curious. I didn't open the email. I didn't need to. Those 2 sentences were everything. My husband was having an affair. The woman knew about me and thought my ignorance was funny, and they were already planning their next hookup. I closed the laptop lid, placing it back at the exact angle I'd found it. My mind went eerily calm. My heart was pounding, but my brain was cold. I went back to the counter, picked up the chef's knife, and just resumed chopping vegetables for the stir-fry we were supposed to eat together. Each slice of the blade against the cutting board felt like a final thud. The end of one life, the beginning of another. When Sean came out of the bathroom, smelling of that cologne, he kissed my cheek. It felt hollow, rehearsed. He asked about my day like he was checking a box. I told him about a client presentation, my voice perfectly steady. We sat down and ate dinner. I watched him eat. I watched him scroll his phone between bites. I watched him exist in our home while he was clearly thinking about someone else, planning his next betrayal. I smiled. I asked follow-up questions about his project. I maintained the complete performance of a normal, happy wife, all while knowing, with devastating clarity, that I was sitting across from a stranger. The foundation hadn't just cracked. It was gone. The next morning, I was up at 5 a.m. Sean was still fast asleep next to me, oblivious. The woman lying next to him was no longer his wife. I was an investigator documenting a crime scene. I slipped out of bed, made coffee, and by 7 a.m. I was sitting in my car 3 blocks from my office, just staring at Queen's name in my contacts. My pride was at war with my survival instinct. Asking my best friend, the divorce lawyer, for a referral, it was like signing my marriage's death certificate. It made it real. There would be no going back. But the alternative, confronting him, emotional, messy, and totally unprepared, was worse. That was walking into a battle unarmed while he'd been planning his little campaign for months. I pressed call. Queen answered, her voice all friendly. "Jane, hey, everything okay?" "I need a referral," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "For myself, a divorce attorney." The silence on the other end lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like a year. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. The friend was gone. The professional was here. "Ms. Hayes," she said, no hesitation. "Vivian Hayes. She's a shark, she's thorough, and she does not lose. I'm texting you her number right now." 20 minutes later, I had a consultation scheduled for that afternoon during a lunch break Sean would assume was my regular yoga class. Vivian Hayes' office was on the 43rd floor of a high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan. All clean lines and glass, making the city look magnificent and completely indifferent to my personal dumpster fire. Ms. Hayes herself was a sharp woman in her mid-50s, silver hair in a precise bob, with a no-nonsense vibe that, weirdly, made me feel safe. She listened to my whole story: the email, the cologne, the Thursday cash withdrawals, the laptop. She just took notes. When I finished, she set down her pen. "Jane, I'm going to be very direct because that's what you're paying me for. You have 2 options. 1, you react emotionally right now, confront him, and lose all your leverage. 2, you gather evidence methodically, and you control this entire outcome. Which one do you want?" "The second one," I said without blinking. "Good," she replied. "Then we need to talk about documentation, financial protection, and strategic timing. This is going to feel awful. You're going to feel like you're doing something wrong, spying on your own husband. You are not. You are protecting yourself from someone who has already proven your well-being is not his priority." For the next 3 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I became a detective in my own marriage. I photographed credit card statements he left on the counter. I documented his texting patterns. I logged into our family phone plan online and tracked his phone's location data during his late nights at the office. It felt dirty. I'd spent 12 years building trust with this man, and now I was dismantling it, piece by piece, all while pretending everything was fine. But Ms. Hayes' words echoed in my head. "Documentation is protection. You're not violating his privacy. You're gathering evidence of how he violated your partnership." The credit card statements made my stomach turn. The Lakeside Boutique Hotel, every Thursday night, for the last 4 months. He was charging the rooms for his affair to our joint credit card. He was literally making me pay for my own betrayal. I photographed every statement, highlighted every charge, and built a spreadsheet. The $200 cash withdrawals, every Wednesday, without fail. From an ATM near his office, clearly his walking around money for a life I wasn't part of. Dinner receipts for 2 at restaurants we'd never been to. I created a master spreadsheet that was a work of art. Color-coded rows for every lie, every late meeting, every single expense that couldn't be explained. I was building a legal case against the man I'd promised to love forever. But the hardest part wasn't the spying. The hardest part was the performance. I cooked him dinner. I asked about his day. I kissed him goodbye, all while knowing, all while cataloging his lies. My sister Michelle knew something was up. She lives in Milwaukee and has 0 filter. "You sound weird," she said on our weekly call. What's wrong? I hesitated. Telling Michelle was like lighting a fuse, but I was drowning in this. The confession just poured out, the email, the hotel charges, the spreadsheet. Michelle's reaction was exactly what I expected. I'm going to kill him, she seethed. I'm driving to Chicago right now and I'm setting his car on fire. Does he still park in that garage on State Street? Michelle, no, I said, you can't. If you do anything, you will blow this whole thing up. You'll ruin my legal strategy. She reluctantly agreed, but I could hear the rage simmering. Then Ms. Hayes recommended a private investigator. Denzel Webb, a former Chicago PD detective who specialized in marital cases. He was expensive, $2,000 up front. He's worth it, Ms. Hayes promised. He'll get you photos, undeniable proof. This isn't about punishment, it's about leverage. She's not playing anymore, she's getting the receipts. If you believe in fighting fire with fire, smash that like and subscribe. Don't be a bystander in your own life. Or, I don't know, maybe you're the type to just roll over? Tell me in the comments why you wouldn't fight back. I need to understand. Denzel worked for 2 weeks. When he delivered his report in a professional binder, I had to sit down. The photos were devastating. Sean and Amber holding hands on a beach I didn't recognize, kissing in a parking lot with the casual comfort of an established couple. Every image was time-stamped and geotagged. But Denzel found more. Sean had been renting a lakeside cabin 40 minutes outside the city for the last 6 months. The rental agreement was in his name, paid with our joint credit card. And the financial analysis, Denzel calculated that Sean had spent approximately $12,000 of our joint savings on this affair. Hotel rooms, the cabin, dinners, gifts, our shared money funding his betrayal. Denzel looked at me. Mrs. Montgomery, your husband isn't just cheating. He's actively stealing from your shared future to fund it. That changes the math, legally. That night, I watched him eat the pasta I'd made, and I felt nothing. No love, no anger, just cold. The Friday morning Sean left. Everything seemed normal. He came out with his little rolling suitcase. Conference in Minneapolis this weekend, he announced, kissing my forehead. Big potential client. Back Sunday, maybe Monday. Good luck, I said, forcing warmth into my voice. I'll miss you. The lie tasted like ash. He walked out the door. The second his car was out of the garage, I called Ms. Hayes. He's gone. Minneapolis conference. Verify it, she ordered. Call his office, right now. I called the main line at Morrison Associates. Hi, this is Jane Montgomery, I said, manufacturing a confused wife voice. I'm trying to reach my husband, Sean, at your Minneapolis conference, but I forgot the hotel. The pause on the other end said it all. Mrs. Montgomery? The HR coordinator said. I'm sorry, but we don't have any conferences scheduled this quarter. Are you sure about the dates? I thanked her and hung up. He hadn't just lied. He'd constructed an elaborate fictional business trip. He was at the cabin with Amber. Sunday came and went. Total silence. Then, at 9 p.m., a single text. Extended. Don't wait up. That was it. The last thread snapped. The abandonment I might have felt weeks ago was gone. It was replaced by strategic resolve. Monday morning, I dismantled our life. First, the locks. I called a 24-hour locksmith and had new high-security deadbolts on the condo door by noon. The lease was solely in my name, purchased with my inheritance. That little detail was now my fortress. I called building management and had Sean Montgomery's name and key fob access formally revoked. Tuesday, the money. I called our credit card companies and canceled every joint card. I timed it so any charge he tried to make on his little trip would be declined. I opened a new checking account at a completely different bank and redirected my consulting income. I documented every transfer as protecting marital assets from further dissipation. Wednesday, I packed his things. I went through our home room by room, his clothes, his toiletries, his architecture books. All of it went into boxes stacked in the guest room. Each item was a memory. The watch I gave him, the shirt from our anniversary. I forced myself to treat them like artifacts from a life that was already over. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford. On Wednesday afternoon, day 5 of his disappearance, Denzel called. I have what you need. We met at a coffee shop way across town. He slid a manila envelope and a USB drive across the table. The new photos were from the cabin. This was no conference, they were domestic. Cooking together, Amber laughing as Sean had his arms around her waist, sitting on the deck with wine. One photo hit me like a punch, them at a small-town restaurant, Sean wearing a new jacket I'd seen in our closet, and Amber wearing a delicate silver necklace I knew I'd seen a charge for. They were loading groceries into his car. This wasn't a fling. This was a parallel life. "They're not hiding, Jane," Denzel said. "This is routine for them." He handed me the cabin's rental agreement, signed by Sean Montgomery, paid for with our joint credit card. The arrogance. He'd made me an unwitting financial partner in his affair. Thursday evening, day 6, I sat at my dining table. Ms. Hayes was on speakerphone. We assembled what she called the accountability package. Inside a single yellow legal envelope, we put the divorce petition, already filed with the county clerk that morning. Marcus's photographs, annotated with dates and locations, the credit card statements, with every hotel, dinner, and cabin charge highlighted. Bank records of my asset transfers, with the legal justification, a formal cease and desist letter, the letter from building management, confirming he was no longer an authorized occupant, and the crown jewel, a forensic analysis calculating the $12,000 of marital funds he had dissipated. "This is your insurance policy," Ms. Hayes said. "When he returns, and he will because men like this always think they can come home, you don't argue. You don't cry, you don't explain. You just hand him this envelope and watch his entire world reset." I sealed the envelope and placed it in the dead center of the coffee table, a landmine. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Friday, 6:00 p.m. I heard it. The scrape of a key in a lock that no longer recognized it. The scraping got more forceful, confused. Then silence. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. A text from Sean. "I'm outside. Lock isn't working." I picked up the yellow envelope. I walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw him. He looked great. Fresh haircut. A new charcoal gray sweater I'd never seen. He looked like a man back from a vacation, not a man crawling home from a betrayal. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The complete, total absence of guilt on his face confirmed everything. He looked annoyed that the lock was his main problem. And then he said them. The words that crystallized everything. "You should be thankful I even came home. Honestly, Jane, after the week I've had, walking back in here feels like a sacrifice." The audacity. It was breathtaking. He vanished for 6 days on a fake trip with his mistress, and his return was a sacrifice. The old Jane, the peacekeeper, wanted to smooth it over, but the envelope in my hand was an anchor. "You're right," I said. My voice was ice. "Thank you for coming home. But this isn't your home anymore." I held the yellow envelope out to him. "Your early severance package. Everything you need to know is in there." He snatched it, still radiating that smug entitlement. He tore it open like it was junk mail. I watched his face. It was a masterclass in reality hitting you like a freight train. First, confusion as he scanned the legal jargon of the divorce petition. Second, comprehension as he turned the page to the first photograph of him and Amber at the cabin. Third, disbelief as he flipped through the timestamps, the geotags, the financial records. His hands started to physically tremble when he hit the credit card statements with the highlighted charges. By the time he got to Ms. Hayes's financial analysis of the $12,000 he'd stolen, all the color was gone. He was gray. "What is this?" he whispered. This isn't legal. You can't lock me out of my own home." I leaned against the doorframe. "Actually, this condominium is in my name, exclusively. The lease, the mortgage I'm assuming, the security deposit, all paid for by my inheritance. You've been living here as my guest, legally speaking, as you'll note from the documentation." He tried denial. "This is circumstantial. Those photos could be from work." "Page 5, I cut him off. "The cabin rental agreement, signed in your name, charged to our joint account." Denzel was very thorough. Then came the blame. The classic cheater's pivot. "You've been so cold for months, Jane, all about your work. Amber, she gets me. She actually listens." I let him finish. I let him dig his own grave. When he was done, I just said, "You chose to have an affair instead of a conversation. You chose to build elaborate lies instead of leaving with integrity. and you chose to spend $12,000 of our shared money to fund it. Those were your choices. My only choice was how to respond, and I chose documentation over devastation, strategy over suffering. That was main character energy. She handed him his walking papers and didn't even blink. If you're here for that kind of strength, you know what to do. Subscribe. Be part of the solution. And if you're not subscribing, I have to ask, what are you afraid of? Let me know below. He looked at me, searching for the old Jane, the one who would fix this. She was gone. Where am I supposed to go? He stammered. That's an excellent question you should have considered before spending a week at a lake cabin with Amber, charging it to our joint account, I said. Your belongings are packed in the guest room. You have exactly 1 hour to get them before building security enforces the occupancy restrictions. The letter is in your envelope. He tried one last time. Nostalgia. 12 years, Jane. That has to mean something. You can't just erase 12 years. It meant everything, I said, my voice quiet. Past tense. You erased it when you converted those 12 years into a cautionary tale. I started to close the door. He put his hand on it, desperate. Please, can we just talk about this? I looked him dead in the eye. Adults don't disappear for 6 days, Sean. Adults don't invent fictional conferences. Adults don't spend marital funds on their affairs. You wanted to be treated like an adult? You're being served comprehensive divorce papers. This is the adult version of this conversation. You've been operating in bad faith for months. I'm no longer interested in negotiating. I closed the door. The deadbolt engaged with a solid final click. Through the peephole, I watched him. He just stood there for 2 full minutes, staring at the envelope. Then his shoulders slumped. He turned and walked to the elevator, a defeated man. It was finished. The weekend was quiet. Too quiet. I knew that confrontation wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Monday morning, 10:15 a.m. An unknown number. This is Patricia Winters, HR Director at Morrison Associates. I sat down. We're conducting an internal investigation, she said, in that careful HR voice. When you called last week inquiring about a Minneapolis conference, it raised some flags. Subsequently, several other employees came forward about behavior between Mr. Montgomery and his project manager, Amber Caldwell, that appears to violate our workplace conduct policies, particularly supervisor-subordinate relationships. It turned out my call had been the first domino. Colleagues who had given Sean and Amber the side-eye for months finally had a reason to speak up. The extended lunches, the closed-door meetings, the investigation was fast. Amber, as the subordinate, was in clear violation of their fraternization policy. She got transferred to a different department and a formal reprimand in her file. Sean, as the supervisor, got it worse. He bore the responsibility. They demoted him from senior designer to associate, a salary cut of 18%, and they took him off the high-profile library project he'd been leading. His reputation in the firm was torched. I didn't even have to do anything. I just documented reality, and reality did the rest. Then, Tuesday night, 11 p.m., my mom. I knew Michelle must have finally cracked. Jane, my mom started, Michelle told me about Sean. How could you not tell me? How could you make such a huge decision without your family? I was stunned. I was expecting sympathy. She was angry at me. Mom, I needed to handle it. Marriage is about working through things, Jane. She cut me off. You don't throw away 12 years. Have you considered counseling? Have you tried to understand what drove him to this? What role you might have played? Can you believe that? Her own mother. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who just don't get it. If you're tired of being gaslit, join this community. Subscribe right now, and if you think the mom had a point, wow. Okay, you definitely need to go to the comments and explain that one. Please. I tried to explain the months-long affair, the $12,000, the 6-day disappearance. She just countered with forgiveness and commitment. I hung up, realizing I'd lost my husband and I was losing my mom's support, all because I refused to play the victim. The next night, Queen confessed. Jane, I have to tell you something, she said over dinner. Last December, I saw Sean with a woman at that Italian place on Randolph. They were in a booth, real close. It looked wrong. I convinced myself I was misreading it, that I shouldn't plant suspicion. Jane, I'm so sorry. I saw it, and I said nothing. I wasn't even angry. Queen, you were in an impossible spot. If you were wrong, I'd hate you for the suspicion. Since you were right, I hate you for the silence. There was no way for you to win. Our friendship got realer and deeper that night. Then Denzel called. A little follow-up. Thought you should know. Your husband's romantic situation is deteriorating. Amber Caldwell is actively distancing herself, declining his calls. I saw her at a wine bar last night with a different guy. I also obtained a text she sent to a friend. She described Sean as excessively dependent and dramatic. Her words, "He keeps calling to talk about our future. I'm realizing he's just a guy who cheated on his wife, not some romantic hero. The whole thing is exhausting now that it's not a secret." The affair thrived on the secret. It couldn't survive the sunlight. Sean had blown up his 12-year marriage for a fling that couldn't even last 2 weeks of consequences. But the real bomb was yet to come. Ms. Hayes called me into her office. Urgent. Her forensic accountant had found something. "Jane," she said, "Sean didn't just have an affair. He's been systematically planning his financial exit for at least 6 months." She slid a bank statement across the table, an account I'd never seen, at a bank we'd never used, solely in Sean's name, opened 7 months ago. For those 7 months, he'd been diverting his quarterly bonuses and all his freelance income into this secret account, while I was paying our mortgage, our utilities, our groceries from my consulting income. Believing we were a team, the balance was 28,417. "He was building an exit fund," Ms. Hayes said, her voice tight with rage. "He was systematically robbing your partnership to finance his escape from it. This just went from a dumpster fire to a 5-alarm felony. He wasn't just cheating, he was stealing. This is why you have to protect yourself. The best protection on here? That subscribe button. It's free. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed, you're playing with fire. Go to the comments and tell me why you're risking it. I'll wait." That wasn't all. Denzel found a former colleague of Sean's, a woman named Rebecca. She'd left the firm 3 years ago. When Denzel asked about Sean, she said, "Is this about his pattern of workplace relationships? I know Amber isn't the first. He tried the same thing with me when I was a junior designer." She'd rebuffed him, and he'd backed off, but she'd left the firm partly because of it. There were rumors about an intern, too. Amber wasn't the one who'd tempted my faithful husband. She was just the most recent one who'd said yes. And the final, sickening piece. I was packing the last of his boxes and found a leather journal. I know, I shouldn't have. I did. The entries went back 2 years. It was page after page of him, rewriting our history. He wrote about how I had changed after my career took off, how I didn't appreciate him, how our marriage was stale. My success was proof I was prioritizing achievement over intimacy. He had constructed an entire narrative of my failure to justify the betrayal he had already decided to commit. One entry read, "A Amber makes me feel alive again, seen in ways I haven't in years, like the man I was before marriage domesticated me." He didn't betray me because our marriage was failing. He built a story that our marriage was failing so he could betray me and still be the good guy in his own head. I photographed every page and sent them to Ms. Hayes. The settlement conference was 6 weeks later. It was a joke. Sean showed up with a haggard-looking public defender. He looked awful. Thin, stressed, baggy suit. Ms. Hayes didn't play. She was a surgeon. She laid it all out for the judge. The affair, with photos. The $12,000 in dissipated marital assets. The $28,417 in the hidden exit fund account. The internal investigation and demotion from his employer, the testimony from the other colleague showing a pattern, the journal proving he'd rewritten history to justify it all. Sean's lawyer tried to argue, "Your Honor, this is a no-fault state." The judge cut him off. "Counselor, no fault applies to the reason for dissolution. Asset dissipation and financial concealment absolutely influence the equitable distribution. Your client stole $12,000 and hid $28,000. Those are not neutral factors." In the hallway during a recess, Sean tried to appeal to me. "Jane, please, this has gone too far. This is vindictive." I looked at him, the man I'd loved, and I felt nothing. Vindictive Sean would be sending those photos to every architect in Chicago. Vindictive would be sending the cabin rental agreement to Amber's family. This is just consequences. "But 12 years, he whispered. "You don't get to use our history as a shield after you spent months planning your exit and 6 days celebrating it with your mistress," I said. The final settlement was brutal. I retained 100% ownership of the condominium. The judge ruled that the equity he would have had was offset by the money he'd stolen. I received 68% of our remaining joint savings after the court added back the $40,000, $12K plus $28K, he'd dissipated and concealed. No spousal maintenance. He got his car, his personal belongings, and his retirement accounts, minus a portion from the years I'd supported us. I signed the papers with a steady hand. He signed his with hands that were visibly shaking. I walked out of that courthouse into the cold November air, and I felt light. Ms. Hayes stood beside me. "You executed this perfectly, Jane," she said. "You documented everything. You refused to let emotion compromise strategy. That's why you won." I saw Sean come out, looking small and defeated. Our eyes met. He was searching for something in my face. Regret, pity, an opening. I gave him nothing. I just turned and walked away. The drive home was the first time I'd breathed in months. The condo was quiet, but it was my quiet. That weekend, I started to repaint. The neutral beige Sean had insisted on disappeared under a deep, rich teal. The uncomfortable modern couch he loved? Donated. I bought a vintage leather reading chair and put it by the window. I reclaimed my space. I reconnected with friends he'd slowly, subtly isolated me from. My friendship with Queen became unbreakable. About 9 months later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Sean. "I understand now what I destroyed. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're finding happiness. I waited to feel something. Anger, vindication, pain, anything. I felt nothing. This wasn't emotion I was suppressing. This was a genuine, total absence of emotional investment. He was a stranger. His apology wasn't for me. It was for him, to clear his conscience. I wasn't interested. I deleted the message. I blocked the number. The yellow envelope sits on a shelf in my new home office. It's not a weapon anymore. It's a monument. A reminder that documentation defeats manipulation. A reminder that when my world fell apart, I didn't. I got strategic. Peace doesn't come from revenge. It doesn't come from forcing someone to hurt as much as you did. Peace comes from the quiet, unshakable certainty that you protected yourself, that you responded to chaos with strategy, and that you closed the door on a life that was trying to destroy you so you could walk forward into the one you were meant to have. This story, wow, that yellow envelope moment was everything. What was your favorite part? Drop it in the comments below. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that notification bell. You don't want to miss what's coming next.